Good afternoon. We are so glad you joined us. Thank you for being patient with us, and we are going through a little bit of technical difficulties through it. But my name is Jill Daly, and I am the director for the Israel Ministry of Tourism based in Chicago in the Midwest region. So we're excited that you're here with us today. We're excited to be able to share with you more on Israel and the Christian traveler to Israel. So I'm going to go ahead and get started in the presentation. I'm excited that I do have with me today both Richard Liverance, who is our Director of Marketing from our Western region here in the US, and we have Iska. And Iska, we're so privileged to have her today. She is from Israel, one of our guides, and does a lot in terms of the Christian world and her Christian expertise. So you're really going to enjoy her today, having her as part of the presentation. I just wanted to do a brief overview very quickly and tell you a little bit more about some of our offices and and I'm having trouble that our slide is not advancing within this presentation. There we go. So here in the US and Canada, we have 6 offices. We have a regional office in the Northeast region with Chad Martin as our director, a Southern regional office with Yael Golan, our Western regional office, Anat Ben Yosef, myself here in the Midwest, and Gal Hanna, who is our director in Canada. All of our offices are here to help you in terms of serving your clients in going to Israel. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about the religious traveler to Israel and what we're planning to do in the coming days. I know right now we are all at home. We're dreaming of travel, being able to be out again, but are stuck in our homes. So we are at the Ministry of Tourism working very hard in looking at what are our plans for the day after? What are we going to do when people are traveling again? You're going to have a market that's going to be flooding with people from all over the world trying to get you to come to their destination. But one of the very unique things that Israel has is that we are the only place that is the Holy Land where Jesus walked. So we really see that the religious travelers are going to be some of the first that are going to be returning to Israel, wanting to get back into traveling again and wanting to have that experience and that spiritual connection to Israel. So a lot of Christians already, they're very slow to cancel. They don't tend to cancel very quickly. Their decision that's based more on a religious and spiritual decision, not necessarily the money decision of it. It doesn't mean that they're not going to be looking for the best price, the best deals in terms of planning their trip. But once it's planned, they're going to, that's the investment in their spiritual growth. So they are going to continue to do those trips and continue to be a part of traveling back to Israel. So we really are looking at the days after plan and looking at that religious market as being something that's going to be a very strong market for travelers. It's going to be a very strong market for you as agents, you as operators. Right now, what we are doing is we really are talking about inspiration. What is inspiring us and what is keeping us going as we're sitting in our homes and doing that? And really, Israel provides so much inspiration, and it's inspired by Israel with so many different things. So we have a new campaign that's in our social media sites. We're really asking people to be interactive with it. Post your photos, post the times that you've been to Israel. Encourage your clients to do the same. Encourage them to use the hashtag Inspired by Israel, stay healthy, and stay home. We do have a number of social media channels that are there that I'm sharing with you, and I encourage you to use those on your own social media channels as well for your businesses, and use your hashtag, but also use the Inspired by Israel and really start the conversation and dreaming. Dream now so that we all can travel later. But I wanted to look at it a little differently and kind of break it apart in terms of what the Christian market looks like and the Christian community and travelers. And the first part of that is the Protestant evangelical travelers. And some of the reasons why they do travel is they're traveling to follow their pastor. They don't need a daily service. However, the pastor will do biblical teachings at the sites. They're looking for a connection to the land. So they're wanting to have that connection of spiritual prayer and being in the place that Jesus was and being in the place that Jesus walked. They'll want time to pray and reflect on their own. And here's a very important one, and I'll reflect on it too when we talk about the Catholics, but they're there for a spiritual journey. They want to have that spiritual connection to the land. They want to have the spiritual connection to the Bible and the scriptures. So when you ask them why they're going for a spiritual journey. And they're going to those places that Jesus was, where Jesus walked. And as we get a little further into the presentation, and Iska talks a little bit more, she'll be being very specific on some of the different sites. But for the evangelical Christian traveler, they want the opportunity to be baptized in the River Jordan as Jesus was baptized, to have those personal moments and those personal connections and with the land. During the Easter season, and Holy Week, as we're entering into Holy Week, we're getting ready for Easter, we're getting ready for Passover. They're wanting to have that opportunity to be able to go and walk in the places that Jesus walked in his final days, to be able to walk the Hosanna Trail on Palm Sunday, to the Garden of Gethsemane where Jesus prayed before his final walk through Jerusalem and his final resting place. Now the Catholics, they're going to follow their priest. They're going to want the opportunity to follow with their priest. They want the opportunity to share Mass and communion. So it's going to be very important for them to be able to do daily Masses at the churches within Israel. And that's a key factor as well, as they're connecting to the churches. So while the Christian Protestant traveler is connecting to the land, the Catholic traveler is connecting to the churches. They are going to celebrate and they're going to pray as a group and have communion. And here's the key factor that I was speaking of earlier, is that they're going to speak on, they're there on a pilgrimage. They're going to use the words pilgrimage more than they would use the words spiritual journey. Whereas the evangelical Protestant, they're not so much going to say they're there for a pilgrimage. As I said, they're going to want to have the opportunity to celebrate Mass, to be able to see the spiritual sites within Israel. They're going to have the opportunity to walk the Via Dolorosa. Both the evangelical Protestant Christian and the Catholic will want that opportunity. The Catholic is going to want to stop at the different chapels and the different stations along the way. As a matter of fact, on Fridays, when tourists are there in Israel, they are taking the opportunity to walk the Via Dolorosa on Friday afternoons. They're going to want to have the opportunity to celebrate Mass and celebrate communion while they're in Israel. But one of the things that I want to be able to speak about is the difference between that Catholic and Protestant traveler in terms of the sites, in terms of what the itinerary would look like for a Catholic versus a Protestant traveler. And I think it's very important, because as you're speaking to your clients and as you're reaching out to potential clients and churches to be able to visit Israel, it's important to know there's different factors of the places that they're going to want to visit, the places that they're going to want to see while they're there. One of the biggest is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre versus the Garden Tomb. For the Catholics, they do believe that Christ's final burial place was at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. They're going to want the opportunity to be able to go to the church, to be able to visit his final resting place. While the evangelical Protestant traveler, they're going to want to visit the Garden Tomb. The Garden Tomb is where they believe was the final resting place for Jesus. This is a great opportunity for those Protestant evangelical Christians to have the opportunity to have a worship service, have a communion service. I mentioned that the Catholic traveler is going to want to be able to attend Mass each day and celebrate Mass in the Holy Land. And the Protestant traveler, it's going to be very important to be able to do communion at the Garden Tomb, to be able to have that. There's private gardens set up for them to be able to visit and for them to be able to see. Now, just because it's a Catholic versus a Protestant traveler doesn't mean that there aren't some places that are the same, that are you're going to see most of the itineraries are going to be very similar, with a few differences and a few nuances of that. The Mount of Beatitudes is a perfect example of that. You have the church at the Mount of Beatitudes. A Catholic traveler is going to want to be able to celebrate church, celebrate Mass at the church itself, where the Protestant traveler is going to want to have the opportunity to connect with the land, to be able to do a devotional, to be able to read from the Bible and the scriptures, and be able to see the Sea of Galilee overlooking that. I know for myself, having the opportunity to be able to have that connection with the land is so much different in terms of when I am in church, when I am hearing the scriptures read and hearing the Sermon on the Mount, is I know what that land looks like. I know what it was like for the time of the apostles, the time of Jesus, and when he did his ministry and his teachings in those locations. Another prime example is the Church of All Nations in the Garden of Gethsemane. The Church of All Nations is another beautiful church that the Catholics will have the opportunity to say Mass, and right beside it is the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus would have likely been in his final hours praying to his Father. The opportunity for a Protestant to be able to enter the garden, to be able to sit peacefully within the garden, to be able to do spiritual teaching within the garden is really an important factor. For pastors, they really have the opportunity for those biblical teachings and creating the spiritual context of the places and of the land. So one of the things that I wanted to kind of address too is when you're looking at Israel, when you're selling Israel to the different, when you're approaching a pastor, when you're approaching a priest, you know, why? What's the purpose of being able to go to Israel? And I mean, obviously it's having the opportunity to go and walk in the footsteps of Jesus, to be able to see the places of the scriptures. But really, some of the things that are the benefits in coming back is for the pastor and the priest, their teaching is so much richer, with a vivid picture of the scriptures. When the pastor's speaking and teaching on the different places within the Bible, he now has that picture and that contextual geography of what it was like there. When the priest is doing his homily and speaking about the scriptures, he's able to put that back to the land and give a very vivid picture of it. For the congregation, there's a deeper understanding of the Bible and also the role of the church, that they're seeing they're seeing these places and they're seeing these scriptures, really putting them to life and what they're reading. And there's a stronger sense of community among members. For anybody that's been to Israel, anybody who's traveled, you know that when you have the opportunity to travel with these people, they become family, because you're having that chance to share these places with them. So among the community members and among those that are coming with their pastor or coming with their priest, they're really getting a greater sense of community with each other. But in addition to that, is they're sharing it with the people at home, with their family and the congregation that didn't come. And those two are getting that connection to the trip and the land as well. And it gives a stronger commitment to the church. People come back, they're stronger with their tithing, with their volunteering, with the overall growth of the church. So as a travel advisor, as someone that is offering travel to Israel, you have so much opportunity to offer these pastors and offer these churches the ability to grow their church, the ability to have a stronger commitment for people within their church. So as you're looking to sell Israel as a destination, it's more than just selling the destination, but it's helping these churches and it's helping these pastors grow their communities and grow their churches, and having that stronger sense and that stronger connection to the church itself. So I'm going to give the opportunity. I want to turn this over to Iska. As I mentioned, Iska, she's an expert on Christianity. She's a lecturer, she's a researcher, and she's a guide within Israel. And she can really give you a greater detail of being in these biblical places. in Israel, showing the geographical context of the scriptures to the land of Israel itself. And before I turn it over, I do want to encourage you that if you do have questions throughout the presentation, I'm sorry I didn't mention this earlier, but please use the chat function, and please put your questions in the chat function, and we will be answering them at the end of the presentation. So I am going to turn it over to Iska now.
Thank you, Jill. Hello, everyone, and happy Easter. In this country, actually, the two religions come together year by year. The Pesach for the Jewish people, the Holy Week, and then Easter celebrations. It is a matter of 2,000 years that people were trying to envision who Jesus was. And actually, the land of Jesus is an opportunity not to meet the divine Jesus. That's the Jesus that is met in the church, in the sermons, but the land of Jesus is actually an opportunity to learn who Jesus the man was. Actually, 2,000 years ago, he celebrated the same Jewish Pesach, the same Jewish celebration that we're going to celebrate tomorrow. Very currently, what is happening nowadays in the world, I believe will show itself later when all this is over, when people, as Jill said, will want to come to the land in order to realize better what is this that this world is about. The land of Jesus, you know, it's perhaps not the most green country in the world, it's not the deepest lakes and not the highest Alps, but it is the only land where the Son of God became man. And so just by walking around and envisioning how he walked is something of great intimate sensation. And I believe that after this crisis is going to be over, many people are going to want to walk in those footsteps also in order to relive what it is to be in despair and yet with promise. And this is why I titled this The Land of Prophecy, Promise and Healing. And what we're looking at very specifically now is a beautiful view of a valley very close to where Jesus grew up. This valley is called the Jezreel Valley. I hope it can, yeah, good. If you look at this map of the northern part of Israel, Jesus was raised, he grew up in Nazareth, that is in the left and down hand side of the slide. And he
We're not seeing the slides.
You're not seeing the slides? Should I do another share? Just a minute.
Try share.
Maybe your technical person can see, because before we could see it. Where's the technical person to help us with it?
Yeah.
Want me to try again? Is it okay?
Yes, now you're good, Iska. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm sorry, but
okay.
Now, okay, so now you're surprised because you see the Jezreel Valley, and this is a surprise that you have when you go up to Mount of Precipice, and all of a sudden you realize, and that is very important, that this is what Jesus saw. Okay, now, as Jill said before, there are churches, there are prayer houses, but when Jesus was around, he did not see churches. What he definitely saw was the topography of the land. And that's why I said when people want to come and retrace the footsteps of Jesus, they actually will walk the very same venues. They will walk up and down valleys and mountains. And the story of the Jezreel Valley, which I want to show you now, is also a very specific story, which I think will shed light in general on the experience of the people who come here. And for the moment, I don't mind if they are Protestants or Catholics or Orthodox, that doesn't matter. The thing is this, Jesus lived most of his life in this area. The red line that you see is what we call the Gospel Trail or the Jesus Trail. It's a very nice, about 70 kilometers, which is what, I don't know, maybe 200, I'm not sure what it is in your numbers, but anyway, it is a 4 days walk, and if people are fast walkers, they can do it in 3 days. It is from Nazareth to Capernaum, and it crosses the Galilee. And this is exactly the journey that Jesus did, because he left his hometown to have his now new house, his new residence by the Sea of Galilee. Now, if we're looking again at the churches, churches are beautiful, unique, some are small, some are big, but in general, Jesus was not in churches. It is in church that people can recall again what it is to talk with Jesus the divine. But it is always when they come out of the church that they see Jesus the man. And for many people, this is the experience that they live, and they are very willingly accepting when they come to the Holy Land, because it is now a human, it's an incarnate Jesus, much closer to you and me and to them. So it is an opportunity. And if we are talking about the experience of many of the visitors to the land of Jesus, they're pretty much shocked because they meet Jesus, the Jewish person. For example, here in Nazareth, you can see it's written in Arabic and in English, a synagogue. Now, next to this big church that you see on the right-hand side, on the left-hand side, you see it's a different place, which is called Jesus' synagogue. Today it is a church, but it is actually reminding that Jesus was part of a people that spoke Hebrew, that understood God as Father, that thought about the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, as people who traveled the land. This sensation of traveling the land, just as well as sailing the sea, is something that people at that moment when they're here, they can identify with Jesus. At home, people identify with Jesus because he's their savior. But here they identify as the people that walk in the very same places. And I think this is a very unique type of trip. You cannot find it in Norway, in the fjords. You cannot find it in the Austrian Alps. You cannot find it anywhere. It is a whole different encounter. It is a total different encounter. Of course, we're talking about a land where these stories are not stories. These stories are history, and this history is written in rocks and in archaeology. In this case, this modern church of Capernaum is resting on the house of Saint Peter. Here, those stories become alive because they are basically proved. What you see is what was. So we're not talking here about mythology. We're not going, Greece is beautiful, I love Greece, but we're not going to see where Aphrodite was born, because we don't really think that Aphrodite was born. But Jesus was born, and he was part of a people. Now let's go to this Jezreel Valley. And I will tell you that in general, the views and the land itself is no less beautiful than the most beautiful church. Again, why? Because this is what Jesus saw. And there are not many places where you can say, this is what Zeus saw or Aphrodite saw. This is what Jesus saw. What is what's so unique? The Jezreel Valley is a very fertile valley right below the mountains of Nazareth. And when you read in the Hebrew Bible and the Old Testament, you can find that the name Jezreel appears time and again. I want to give you just a few examples. It is not now a pastoral sermon, but I just want to give you the sensation of what it is for a group to stand up here and to recall how Israel camped by the spring in Jezreel. We're talking about the Philistines fighting the Israelites, and they are now stationed by a spring in a place called Jezreel. In around the year 1000 BC, King Saul is fighting those Philistines. And then, few decades later, there's another king called Ahab, And it says that he reigned over Israel in Samaria 22 years, and he took for his wife Jezebel, not Jezreel, but Jezebel, the daughter of somebody from Sidon, from Lebanon. Why do I say this? Because actually Jezreel and the valley was their palace. They had two palaces. Now you can see Jezebel on the left-hand side. All these biblical stories may not be very, very familiar to some of the Christians, but when they come, it's actually bringing the whole history, time tunnel going 1,000 years pre-Jesus days. Why is it important? Because it is, there's a story here. There are many stories that relate to our lives. For example, the story here in the first book of Kings, chapter 21, explains how Ahab, with his wife Jezebel, who was a pagan worshiper, are actually mistreating the people. They are taking by force and by corruption the vineyard of someone called Naboth. Now, for many of those people, it is like hearing a story about the mythology. You say, wow, that's very unique. This is very, this is a story I've never heard. But in reality, we hear about these stories all the time. So what is the paradigm? The paradigm is, are we going to have a righteous person that will be able to stand to confront the kings who are mistreating the inhabitants? And here comes the story of Elijah. Now, for most of the Christians, the name of Elijah is known because he's mentioned more than 30 times in the New Testament. And here we understand that Elijah, and in this case, many of the pastors would like very much to think that they're like the Elijah, that they are able to speak the words, not only of wisdom, but of truthfulness, and looking into the eyes of politicians and saying, but look, we are now, we should do the right thing. Okay, and here the story goes on, and so we are 1,000 years before Jesus, right? Elijah the Tishbite, that's his name, he says to Ahab, look, you will not get rainfall, you will not get rain, and this whole place will look like a desert. Now, you saw the Jezreel Valley. It's a beautiful valley with beautiful brown soil and green pastures and vineyards. But this country here is constantly going between dramas of a lot of rain and drought. And this is what we are suffering today with Corona age. Until about 3 months ago, everybody had rain. Everybody was into their own good life. And all of a sudden, we are in this desert. So I believe that when tourism, religious tourism comes back, all these things, all these stories are going to be extremely, extremely relevant. They will be reread as a kind of a warning, all right? So here we have the story of Elijah, just to tell you very quickly that he's one of the heroes of the area. Now, why am I using this to tell you how to sell the land of Israel to Christians? Because I will always ask this question, and this is a very human, normal question. When Jesus grew up, turning to his mother, saying, Mom, when I grow up, I want to be like. And now we'd say, well, what did he know about the world that he said, I want to be like somebody? And I can ask every pastor, every Christian, what do you think? When he was going to bed and his mother telling him, go to sleep, and he says, yes, but when I grow up, I want to be like. Would he want to be like King David or like Abraham? And I have a feeling that he wanted to be like the prophets. And this is why the Galilee is a place where both the pastors and the groups will feel that knowing the biblical characters is actually knowing more about Jesus. How do you know more about Jesus? Because here, for example, Elijah and later his disciple Elisha will always go to the people that are in need. They will go to the women that are either widows, their children are being sold to those that they owe money to. Um, there are fantastic stories about the power and the strength of Elijah, but more often than not, like here, this story is when people are in need, they will come with the comforting words. For example, here, the jar of flour shall not be spent and the jug of oil shall not be empty. To whom is this promised? To this woman whose children have nothing to eat and she has to sell them. So if I'm looking at all these amazing stories, Elijah resurrecting the dead boy of a mother, and then asking the rain to come down. These are all very reassuring stories, which when we think 2,000 years ago, what did a peasant boy know about the world? Did he want to ask to be Hercules? Did he want to ask to become Zeus? No, most probably he knew all these stories, the biblical stories. When he was going up to that mountain to look from above at the Jezreel Valley, he did not think about any story that you may have, not Disney stories and not any other thing, but biblical stories. So his journey from Nazareth to the Sea of Galilee is actually the journey into the land of the prophets. Very dramatic. Now you see here, for example, a small church that was erected on the side of a hill there in the Jezreel Valley. Very interesting, on the two sides of that hill, there are two villages, one commemorating the story of the prophet Elisha resurrecting the son of a woman, and on the other side, the story of Jesus resurrecting the son of a widow. So two stories happening in the same place. Is that coincidence? It is simply because this place was the landscape and the mindscape of Jesus stemming from the Hebrew Bible, and it is today for the pilgrims that come, it is basically bringing back the opportunity to understand who Jesus is. Exactly the man. Look at this hill that you see in the distance. This is the Jezreel Valley, and the view is from the top of the mountain of Nazareth, overlooking to that specific hill. There are groups that want to go to the church inside and pray, but I think that the most dramatic element is to go and do the viewpoint, because it is there where you look and you can understand that this is what Jesus saw, and what he saw in his eyes was Elisha and Elijah and all the biblical characters with their message. This is basically what shaped him. So it is just one example. Now, I think that in general, when you plan your itineraries to your groups, maybe you want to start in the Galilee because you want to help people grow with Jesus. You want them to feel what it was like for him to be there at the age of 10 and age of 18, and then at 20-something. And finally, in the very end, go to Jerusalem. And in Jerusalem, the greatest drama, the biggest maybe historical theater ever. But the Galilee is an opportunity to grow, and it is the growth, I believe, of both Jesus and also the pilgrim or the tourist that comes to understand, to be for a moment in a different topography, and that is the human landscape. Okay, it's a human landscape to understand. In the picture here, you see Mount Tabor, or the Mountain of Transfiguration. So when you remember the story of the Transfiguration in the Gospel, here again you see Jesus is meeting with Moses and Elijah. Why didn't he meet with Aphrodite and Zeus? Because they were not part of the deal. They're not part of the history of salvation. So in this part of the world, actually every stone, every mountain, every valley resonates, first of all, the Hebrew Bible, and then Jesus as a product of the Hebrew Bible. Of course, it is impossible to be in our part of the world and not go to the Jordan River. And in this case, you can see there are now churches, new churches built on the bank of the Jordan River. But my point is this: even when you go to the Jordan River, you cannot ignore the fact that before Jesus, someone entered, and in order to cross from one side to the other, and that was Elijah. It is exactly the place where Elijah with a chariot was taken, and his disciple Elisha is going to receive the mantle and be the next prophet. So the same place where John, the master, was saying to Jesus, you are greater and you're going to lead, here was Elijah, and the follower was Elisha. So there are ample opportunities here to read the Hebrew Bible, see how it means today and how it meant to Jesus. So Elijah, the stories of Ahab, whichever way you look at it, I think the beauty of this land is that it is a time tunnel, that one, in order to meet Jesus, has to meet the God of Israel, to meet the prophets of Israel. And if I come to this, just one last example, and that is the Carmel mountain. This very statue that you see is the statue of Elijah standing on Mount Carmel. And in that engraving that you see in the picture, you see how he's actually confronting the Baal, the pagan worshippers, again, around the question of who is the right God, who is the God that's going to bring rain. And eventually Elijah becomes, of course, triumphant, and the rain will come after the pagans are going to disappear. But I would say that of all Hebrew Bible figures, I believe that it is not Elijah that was the model for Jesus, but Elisha. And why is that? Because Elisha was the person to do more miracles than you can even imagine. Here you see in this picture how Elijah found Elisha. For many of you, the name Elisha is not even well known, but Elisha is far closer to the name Yeshua. Elisha, Yeshua is someone that has the power of God to do saving matters. And in this case, what you see is Elijah calling Elisha. And when Elijah will go up, Elisha will be down below, as you see in this stained glass window. And Elijah will take the power of Elijah. Here again, you see in a very nice monastery near Jerusalem, this icon showing how Elijah is going above the Jordan River. You see how important the Jordan River is a place in order to hand over the mission. And so Elisha is down there. Of course, the Jordan River is where the Israelites crossed in order to enter the promised land, with Moses staying on the other side and Joshua. So you see again that like Moses is handing over to Joshua, John the Baptist handed over to Jesus. Elijah previously handed over to Elisha. So it's a place where there is a transmission of vocations. And in this case here, we come back to Elisha, who is doing twice as many miracles as Elijah did. And in all his miracles, he is providing people with food, with consolation, with resurrection. I believe when this crisis is going to be over, all these stories are going to have a very, very important meaning. And it is the story of compassion. Take a look at this very quickly, how Elisha is telling the woman, look, you can do this. It's going to be a miracle. If you pour into these barrels from one pitcher, but continue and pour, all these barrels are going to be full with oil. And this is what has happened. So what is it? It's actually like the multiplication of loaves and fishes. So how can we not see that when Jesus is walking this land and thinking, what is my mission? What is my vocation? How is it possible that he does not see Elisha as a model? And so now I don't want to move to the Hebrew, but I will tell you that so many of Elisha's stories are actually the stories of Jesus being a healer of people from a point of view whether it is personal and a point of view that is family-wise and society-wise. And I will, I think, finish with this again to say, whether it is Jesus or whether it is Elisha, this land here is a land that brings the stories of humanity, of difficult times, despair, but promise. And the promise is that if you have a good shepherd, you can do it. And in the valley of Jezreel, you can see both agriculture and the flocks. And you can talk about basically how the most ancient text in the world comes into reality. And this is an opportunity which I don't think anyone would want to miss. So I hope you will be able to bring this inspirational calling to your groups to come.
Thank you so much, Iska. I know we're short on time, and I do want to remind everyone, if you do have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat section of it. And I'd like to turn it over to Richard Liverance, who again is from our Western Regional Office here in the U.S.
Thanks so much, Jill. And thanks, Iska. That was a fantastic presentation. It just shows you the importance of the biblical text and the land of Israel, how they are inseparable. And that's really what transforms people's lives when they go to Israel. Christians, I've talked to both religious people and non-religious people, and everybody who goes to Israel is changed somehow by the experience. But Christians often say to stand on the site and to open the biblical text and to read the story, it's as if I became a part of that text. It's as if I stepped into the biblical story, and that's what transforms lives. And that's why we're in this business of promoting travel to Israel, because it is so important. And so all of you who have clients and are putting together itineraries and putting together tours for Christians, if you're reaching out to Christians, we hope that this has been helpful to you just to see the connection and how important the connection is between the land of Israel and the biblical text. And that's why Christians go to Israel, both Roman Catholics as well as Protestant evangelicals. They want to connect to their faith. They want to understand the Bible deeper, and to stand on the site. There's really nothing that compares to standing on the site and opening the text of Scripture of what happened on that site. It is life transforming. The biblical context is so important. By the way, I've been with the Ministry of Tourism for 4 years. Before that, I was 25 years as a pastor. My first trip to Israel was life transforming to me, even though I had studied the Bible for most of my life, had been in formal biblical training as well. I'd looked at the atlases, but the atlases do not compare to what it's like to actually stand on the site. And so we hope that you will reach out to pastors, that you will reach out to priests, get them to go to Israel, and also encourage them to bring their congregations back, because it transforms their life. Let me just share one little slide with you, and then we'll see if we have any questions. This slide is just a quote that I want to read for you to show you the importance between the geographical context of Israel and how important that is. This is one of my favorite quotes. It's from a work called The Sacred Bridge, which is put out by Carta Jerusalem. It's one of the premier atlases to understand biblical Israel and that region. This is in the introduction to the Atlas. It says this: of all the writings held sacred by the world's religions, only the Bible presents a message linked to geography. This is not just the location of religious centers, but the experience of a people in its land, a people that has insisted on its God-given right to self-identity throughout the ages and in defiance of all forces that seek to deny it. All Jews and Christians who profess to find the source of their faith in these scriptures look to the experiences of that people depicted in the Bible as examples and role models for their search after the divine will and for their moral conduct among men. The religious experiences of that ancient people took place in relation to a geographical setting, generally a small postage stamp on the face of the globe, a patch of terrain in the southern part of the eastern Mediterranean littoral or coastline. That's a great quote because it shows the importance of geography and the geographic context to understanding the scriptures as well, and the divine will and our moral requirements or our moral dictates as Christians and also as Jews. No other book, no other religious book is as connected to geography as the Bible is, and there is a geographic context that is as important to the understanding of the scriptures as the literary or the grammatical context or the historical context as well. So this is why Christians go. They want to connect in that way. Any questions that you have that we can answer? Let's see, I'm just looking over here. All right, from Ari, can the ministry have a tour of ISCA in the US once travel resumes and we are allowed to congregate in Ecclesiastes once again? I guess that's for you, ISCA. We'd love to have you come and do a speaking tour. It would be great. Let's see what else we have here.
One of the questions I know that people have asked is we did do a recording of the webinar, and
Yep.
It will be available to everyone. We will follow up afterwards and send everybody the recording of the webinar. And I encourage you to share it with your colleagues, share it with friends. If you'd like to share it, you're more than welcome to do that.
Okay, Presley asks, I have clients, a pastor of a church that wants to put together a Israel Holy Land tour for the church. An important member of the church is in a motorized wheelchair. I'm looking for a reputable TO that does cater to those with handicap able needs. Is there any that you can refer? There are a couple of companies in Israel that do specifically tours of accessible tourism to Israel. And we should also say that a lot of the sites are becoming more and more accessible to wheelchairs or people with walkers, that sort of thing. A lot of these sites have been opening up recently this past year, more of a way to get people through the old city, for example. So I think best would be to contact one of us. I'd be happy to answer that question more personally with you. And if you want to contact me, I'm in the Los Angeles office, or you can contact Jill or Yael or Chad as well, or Gal, also up in Toronto.
So in terms of,
anything?
I know someone asked for email addresses. It is in our presentations there. You'll see at the beginning of the presentation, we did have everyone's email address. So when we do send it to you, you'll have that information from us. So we will follow up and make sure everybody has that information from you.
Okay, somebody's asking for the quote from the Sacred Bridge. If you will contact us contact me in the Los Angeles office, Richard L. at goisrael.gov.il. I'd be happy to send you that. And then let's see, what else do we have here? In 2000, they were moving from point-to-point limitations. We had to change drivers when we went into some areas. That's no longer the case, so I don't have to worry about that. Will the Israel Ministry of Tourism be printing the fold-out maps again? Yes, we do have fold-out maps. All of our offices have those. If you need some for your groups, you can let us know. Okay, I think that might be it, Jill.
Thank you. We'd like to thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your patience as we started the webinar in the beginning, but we do appreciate that. We will be doing additional webinars from our offices, so stay tuned for that. We'll have that information. And I really encourage you, if you'd like to do a webinar of your own for your clients, we are available in our offices. Any one of the directors, Richard as well, we would be happy to join with you and be a resource for you as you're presenting webinars to any of your clients. So please reach out to us. Please know that we are here. We are a resource for you, and we'll continue to be a resource for you throughout this time. So we appreciate you being here, and thank you. Have a great rest of your day.